in a direction that may not be what you guys are currently studying in school, right? That's why I formed this organization, so that we could have these candid conversations. So today we're going to watch 2 and maybe 3 videos, and we're going to have a discussion about it as soon as Haley turns on her camera, because we are ready to start.
She can't turn on her camera because she's in her car. Oh, never mind. I missed
There
it.
you go. There you go. All right. So first we're going to, of course, share the video. And today is conversation, which is why I need to see all your faces. I want to see the reactions. I want to see what's going on. So let's share the first video here. Share sound and share. Can y'all see the NBC6 logo on your screens?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Live, the news on NBC6 South Florida starts now.
Tonight, a South Florida family is outraged by this image right here and others. They say North Miami Beach police used it and the images of 5 other minorities as targets during weapons training.
People that are out there supposed to be protecting us are using us as target practice.
The department conducting that training says it has halted the practice for the moment, but the family questions why officers were ever firing at targets with images of real people. Now, in this case, all of them were African Americans.
And the family says it shows a lack of sensitivity, especially now when relations between police and minorities across the country are so tense. Tonight, NBC6 investigator Willard Shepard joins us live in the studio with this exclusive investigation. Willard?
Well, Jackie, police in North Miami Beach say they have not violated any regulations, but the chief says his officers should have used better judgment. Now, this is one of the targets that the family says police were using out there. This is the actual target. If you look on the back of this, you can see the bullet holes that have gone through this cardboard platform that they were using out there on this particular day in question. Up here, standard circular targets. This is not a real person, but a computer-generated images right here, so no controversy about that. This is where the controversy comes in. 6 minorities down here who are depicted. These are the photographs that were used out here. And this particular picture right here, amazingly, this man right here, his sister, showed up on the weapons range.
And I was like, why is my brother being used for target practice?
It was here on the Medley Range last month when the targets were used in training for North Miami Beach Police Department snipers. Shooting range records show that after the police left, the Florida National Guard came in. That's when the guardsmen saw what police had left behind.
They were all black males.
Among the photos, her brother Woody's mugshot, taken 15 years ago.
There were like gunshots there. And like, I cried a couple times.
When she said, oh my God, they use you as target practice. The picture actually has like, bullet holes in, one in my forehead and one in my eye. I was speechless.
Deant did 4 years in prison after being involved in a drag race back in 2000 here on Biscayne Boulevard that left 2 people dead.
Now I'm being used as a target and I'm not even living that life according to how they portrayed me as, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a career man. I work a 9 to 5.
This indicates
North Miami Beach Police Chief J. Scott Dennis defends the department's use of actual photographs, saying the technique is widely used and the pictures are vital to facial recognition drills.
our policies were not violated. There is no discipline that's forthcoming from the individuals regarding this.
The chief says the fact that the targets were all African American did not mean there was any racial profiling.
As we utilize an array of pictures, and we'll have 6 pictures of people that look very similar. We have an array for black males. We have an array of white and Hispanic males.
However, he says he is disturbed by the use of this particular photo.
What we are very, very concerned about is the event that occurred here, because it happened to be someone that was arrested by this agency. That individual would be somebody that would be on the streets of North Miami Beach.
We spoke with federal and state law enforcement agencies and 5 separate police departments here in South Florida who have SWAT and sniper teams. Each told us that they only use targets coming from a commercial vendor and never fire at photos of real human beings, ever. Alex Vasquez is a retired FBI agent.
The use of those targets, it doesn't seem correct. Police have different options for targets. I think the police have to be extra careful and sensitive to some issues that might be raised.
The Deons have contacted attorney Endell Brown, who says he finds the use of human images for target practice extremely disturbing.
This can create a very dangerous situation, and it has been ingrained in your subconscious. What does that mean for when someone comes across Woody or another person on the street, and the way their decision-making process on using deadly force or not?
Automatically in his mind, he's going to think target, target, target.
So they're seeing them as criminals before they even get a chance to I surrender.
Now, the police chief says that the sniper team has minority officers on it. He says his department will resume use of the human image targets after it expands the number of images in its inventory. He also says his men will not be using any booking photos from suspects they have arrested. Now, lastly, he says he's going to direct his officers to remove these targets after they use the range. Team 6 investigator Willard Shepard, NBC6, South Florida.
Live.
Let's see. There's a lot to unpack there. Who would like to start? We're going to start with just a quick summary of what you saw, what you heard, and what you experienced during watching that NBC6 South Florida coverage, North Miami Beach Police Department. So, I told you guys before that I do watch a lot of news, usually national politics, but local news is just as interesting and just as fraught with stories that can be discussed on platforms like these. So who wants to go first? Okay, I'm gonna have to call on someone. So Kiefer, you're the first person I see in my screen here, followed by Chad, then Roselaw, then Haley.
So basically, the police were training shooting images of people, and the sister of one of the people that the photos were used was used as a target. I don't think using pictures of real people is a good idea, especially if they may be in like the area, because that is like a trigger, like, Pavlov dogs, where I don't know how to say it, but he had the bell experiment where he rings the bell and then feeds the dogs, and then whenever time he rings the bell, the dog starts to drool. It's like a forced reaction. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Did you hear anything in that story that jumped out at you specifically? That was, I think, a 5-minute or 6-minute piece, but did any of the words in that story jump out at you, other than what the entire story was about?
Well, they did say that they used other people, but they only showed the picture of the Hispanic, Asian, and Black on the actual screen, but they didn't actually show the pictures of white people, except for that computer generated one.
Good catch, good catch. Chad, you're next. Tell me in your quick summary what you saw, what you think about the story, and if any particular part of that story jumped out at you specifically.
I kind of agree with Kiefer. I also don't think that people should be used as targets. I honestly don't really agree with like the whole practice of using a person's head as a target, because I feel like as a police officer, that's like the last thing you want to shoot when you're trying to like help somebody like diffuse a situation. That's like a different situation from this, but that uh but yeah, of course, I just kind of see this as like I don't this is just silly. It's not right. You see, they have five other police departments that aren't doing this, and North Miami the only one doing this. Like, come on now. Like, they just need to cut that out. Like, use some generic dummy people as targets, like other like places use, or like computer generated ones. Um, and yeah, like, and I kind of feel what Kiefer was saying with the dog and the bell. And I think he was like describing like operant conditioning, where like you're kind of like conditioning these officers to like look at, like they said in the video, look at those African Americans and be like, ooh, okay. So when you see somebody similar in the street, which many people seem to think that many of us look similar, then people are like, those officers are operantly conditioned to be like, oh shoot, let me be on my guard. Oh shoot, like I was just shooting somebody who looked like this. Like they're kind of like conditioned. So yeah, that's like my little 2 cents on that.
Thank you. Rose Law, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Your
This
thoughts?
so my thoughts on the video is basically like I don't think like what Shad was saying, I don't think people should be used period for like conditioning for those things. And we mostly seen like pictures of targets of African Americans being used. And they said they were using other kinds of races, but mostly only saw African Americans. So it just trained them as like once you say African American to shoot, and I just think that's not right. I feel like it's a form of disrespect overall.
What kind of neighborhood is North Miami?
Mostly blacks.
It's one of those redlined areas,
Yeah.
that you guys spoke about yesterday with Haley. And Haley, since I just mentioned you, your thoughts and opinions on the piece, and what particular part of the piece really poked at you.
Sure. Can you hear? Is it too loud in there?
Yeah, so I think you're gonna have a issue with your video and your audio. So go ahead and turn off your video and see if we can get a better audio feed from you.
Okay, are you able to hear me?
Yes, better.
Okay, I have a microphone here. Sorry about the quality, but yeah, very upsetting video. I don't think there's any reason you shouldn't be. I mean, that has in general, say in most situations, and especially not that of Emily's practice of like,
So I'm gonna stop you, Haley, because your audio is basically kind of unusable at this part. You might be driving through a area with limited coverage. So can you hear me? Okay. She may have gotten oh, there you go. Okay. So we weren't able to hear from Haley. She's obviously in commute, so her signal may be bad. So the phenomena that you, Kiefer, and Chad are speaking about is the phenomena of training in order to put within a person an automatic reaction to a stressful situation. This is why militaries and police SWAT teams and even police officers train to what they call a muscle memory or a reactionary standpoint. So the first thing I want you all to understand is that police in this country are not trained to wound what they consider suspects. They are trained to shoot them center mass, which will invoke a incapacitative response. and they're trained to shoot many times in the same area to incapacitate what they see as the suspect as quickly as possible. There is no shoot someone in the arm, shoot someone in the leg, and they may surrender. So there's something called a police force continuum, which means that it's basically a military continuum as well, which states you combat what you perceive as force or a threat with overwhelming force, right? So whenever a police draws a weapon, it is not to scare a suspect. It is to alert the suspect that what comes next if you do not comply is deadly force that you can see as deadly. I'm not going to wound you. I'm not going to pet and pamper with you. Now that this weapon is out, it's your life against my life. And at this point, I have an interest in going home to my family. So when you train your muscle memory in a sense where you are seeing your constituents, right, the public that you serve, as deadly targets that you are authorized by your department head, by your municipality to fire upon using deadly force, then what you're essentially saying is we are using military tactics in this zone, right? That's one of the first things that militaries do when they occupy an area. They define an enemy threat, and then they begin to go about ways of mentally conditioning their soldiers to have no capacity of emotion or reserve about taking the enemy's life in that occupied area. Is anyone familiar with any of this? Does any of this sound familiar to anyone? I saw you look like you were going to say something, Chad. What do you have to say about what I just said, even though you're not familiar with it?
I mean, I know I did like a project on like police militarization and something like that way back, but like I don't have the knowledge, but like I kind of like feel you, but like I don't want to like talk about like speak on that or like anything like that.
Kiefer, you have anything to add or comment on that? No. This is a yes space. I know these conversations are very stressful. I understand that. If I am smiling or laughing, it's only because I have been through these conversations several times for several years. And one of the ways that I cope with the stress of the situation is by trying to bring forth joy. Since no one on this call is in direct threat at this point, we can be happy to be alive. So you're going to see me smiling and maybe even chuckling at things, and that's just part of my coping mechanism. I'm human too, right? So one of the ways I cope is by invoking my joy and my ability to smile and my ability to enjoy life. But what I'm telling you all, and what this story is telling you all, and what this story is telling me, is that at this time, which was, I believe, 2015 or 2016 in North Miami Beach, that officers and SWAT who were on the street patrolling red-lined, particularly African-American neighborhoods, were also using faces of suspects or previous suspects or mugshots that were of people in the neighborhoods that they served, building in that memory of this is the enemy. It is okay to destroy this enemy in this situation, in this position, right? Any other comments before we go on to the next video? Because the next video is like the results, right? Or what I see as the results of these kinds of policies. So any other comments before we go into the next video? Everyone is so quiet. Everyone, this is, often we say this is a safe space to the point that I hate that cliche saying, but if there's anything on your mind about this particular piece, this would be a good time to go ahead and and state it. I see Rose Law moving like she's about to say something. Go ahead and say it.
I want to just say one thing that wasn't brought up yet, and that is this. When the police chief or whoever responded and said, we're not violating any laws here, right? For goodness sakes, the answer should have been, how insensitive of us, we will stop this immediately. Not his lack of awareness, his tone deafness to how improper this was, how inappropriate, and everything else that was said. That is what bothers me the most. The man in power not acknowledging how just this was not to be done. Just stop doing it. That would have been the right answer.
Yeah. And now that that point is out there, and I was hoping that that was brought up, but again, I'll let you guys lead the discussion and we'll go where you're comfortable with. But now that you have mentioned that, Colleen, I'm going to mention this. Legal in this country has had nothing to do with moral since the invention of this country. What does that statement mean to you, Kiefer?
What is accepted as law doesn't mean that it's good in morality. So like segregation used to be laws against people. That's not moral. Because we are the same species, we shouldn't treat them differently.
Good. And what institutional practices that deal with racial injustice and social injustice lean on is legality. This is why this problem that we've been having in this country for close to 3 centuries now, as far as the legal establishment of this country, is fraught with confusion, because we continue to lean on legal standards, court case rulings, Supreme Court rulings, to dictate the law of the land instead of leaning on morality. And let's put this in let's say this another way. Martin Luther King, by all standards of law, was a criminal. I can say that without hesitation. He was a law-breaking criminal. And by the statutes of law in this country, he deserved to be in jail. That's a legal argument. Now, the odd thing about all this is that legality seems to also flow in one direction, right? Whereas the subject of the law is supposed to abide by the law, but the purveyors and the creators of laws are okay to bend and break the laws if they're in pursuit of people that they deem to be doing things that are not legal. So the group that investigated Martin Luther King, that's the FBI. Everyone should be familiar with those 3 letters. They broke all kinds of laws in order to investigate and eventually participate in the undoing assassination of Martin Luther King. And we'll go through that another time, because as I said, these conversations can go forever. Is everyone okay where we're at right now? I know, Haley, you didn't get a chance to speak. How is your audio right now? You don't look choppy, so let's check your audio. How are you doing there? Nah, you already froze up.
Okay, really? Okay.
Okay, that's better. No, that audio was good. Let's see that audio again.
Okay, yeah, just we'll have to try it.
Okay, not gonna work, Haley. Just go back on mute, and I won't bother you. So let's go into 1B. That was 1A.
The state of Florida is investigating a police shooting in North Miami. A Hispanic officer shot and wounded an unarmed black man. The victim was a mental health worker who was trying to return an autistic patient to a group home. Jerika Duncan's following this.
This was the scene captured on cell phone video Monday. 47-year-old Charles Kenzie, unarmed, laying on his back, hands raised in the air. The younger man sitting next to him is autistic and escaped from a nearby facility. Kenzie is his caretaker there.
He has something in his hands. All units use caution. He has something inside of his hands.
Police say they were responding to a 911 call of a man with a gun threatening to commit suicide. An object can clearly be seen in the young man's hand.
Looks like this guy is loading up his weapon.
The object was a toy truck. At some point during the incident, one officer reportedly fires 3 shots, not seen on video, hitting Kenzie once in the upper leg. A second video shows police handcuffing both men. Kenzie is recovering at a local hospital.
I still got my hands in the air. I say, no, I just got shot. And I'm standing there, I'm like, sir, why did you shoot me? And his words to me, he said, I don't know.
Police Chief Gary Eugene has been on the job less than 2 months.
I want to make it clear there was no gun recovered.
The officer, a Hispanic male, has been placed on desk duty. Police Union Rep John Rivera.
This is a case where a police officer was trying to save Mr. Kinsley's life, and unfortunately, his shot went astray.
As long as I got my hands up, they're not going to shoot me. This is what I'm thinking. They're not going to shoot me. Wow, was I wrong?
Today, U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch said she is aware of the incident and that her department is monitoring the investigation. Scott, the state attorney's office says any charges against the officer would only be determined after a thorough investigation.
Jerika Duncan with the story tonight. Jerika, thank you.
And that's also North Miami. Same year, by the way. Those 2 stories were on the news the same year. So we're going to do it again. Kiefer, what do you think this is about?
So there was a kid with a mental illness, and his caretaker was calming him down and was like going to like bring him back to the group home thing. And some lady called the cops that the kid had a gun. And when the cops came, the caretaker was on the floor with his hands raised, right, saying don't shoot, but the cop shot him anyways. And they got handcuffed, so, and then he was in the hospital. I think that wasn't right. He did explain the situation. The cop, if they like, they shouldn't have shot, but instead, if it was a gun, they should have just walked over and tried to defuse this situation, like get a better look at it. Because you saw the officer is like far away, and like not really analyzing the situation. So yeah.
Any part of the story that stuck out at you that really twisted you on the inside?
Well, she said it was a gun, but it was a truck. I don't know how you make that kind of mistake.
Okay. Chad?
I think I'm trying to look at this from like both sides, but I kind of see how the connection from the last video and the next video, when the police officer, when he asked, why did you shoot me? And he said, I don't know. It's because it's probably right here. It might be right here. You don't know. That's like the conditioning. It's just like, when you're conditioned to do something, you don't necessarily know that you're doing it. You just do it. You're just trained to do it. And when you're put in a situation, especially these like stressful situations that these police officers are in, where like their lives are potentially on the line, and then they got to look out for the other people's lives. It's just like when you're in that situation, nobody is like, when weapons are pulled, nobody's really calm anymore. Like the situation has changed. So when they think that the kid has a weapon potentially, like they're going in just like, okay, okay, there's lives on the line here. So they're going in kind of stressed. So the fact that he shot him is not, I want to say like not surprising, but it's not like, I guess for lack of a better word, not surprising, because it's all in here for him. And that's just like a shame. It's like, it's a shame. And I don't want to like point at him and say that, oh, he's racist for shooting him, when he was potentially trained, potentially trained to shoot at people that he deems a threat, which were African Americans that they were shooting at with their real faces. That's my little.
Yeah, that's what really stuck out to me about these two stories. And again, they didn't come out on the same day. But when I saw the first story and then the second story, me being the researcher that I am and the person that gives great thought to these things, allowed me to put them in the same discussion. Because the issue that we're dealing with here is not racism or racist. What we're dealing with here is systems of racism, racist systems that are still in effect and running, and will continue to run unabated until we do something about changing these policies. And to point back to what Colleen was saying earlier, we can see that we are a lot further behind than we think we are by listening to the comments of police chiefs that still exist in that area, where they are able to hide behind legal jargon and never deal with morality of situation, right? So racism and systems of racism are not going to be dismantled by hiding behind legal jargon. This is something that has to be done on a groundswell level, where the morality of the folks involved in doing this work have to overwhelm legal systems and ways of seeing legality. Rosela, what do you think about this particular story?
I think it's sad and disappointing, like what Kiefer is saying, like even if they thought like he had a gun, it was really like a toy, they could have moved over like towards the situation. Cause I watched Law and Order, and I seen where like when a person would have a gun, they'll move towards the situation to actually really identify. So I wish they could have done that than to just shoot. But then again, what Chad and you were saying about they're being conditioned to shoot when they see an African American. So that kind of plays a part in the shooting because they're conditioned to do that. So that's really sad about it.
I'm tempted to call on Haley, but I won't. I'll spare us the whole technology thing. Colleen, did you want to add something here?
Yes, I would be very interested in seeing the data. How often is a Black man perceived to have a gun versus a white man perceived to have a gun accidentally shot by police? And how often do police assume the Black man has the gun versus the white man? If there is any question, is that a toy? Is that a phone? Whatever. And then the aftermath of this is also the comparison that's been made between Black Lives Matters protesters and what happened when they were arrested versus the protesters on January 6th who were arrested and allowed to go home and fed food. And there's such disparity. There's such racist practices embedded throughout the entire cycle of the system. Um, I don't, I mean, I appreciate what Chad said, and I applaud him for being so even minded about this, but this is dead wrong. It has to change. And I am all in with Rose Law. It's extremely disappointing and sad.
So again, um, these are police officers, right? Police officers have a very difficult job, and their role is to police society and enforce the will of the politicians that put them there. And of course, they put their lives at risk to do that, because once you wear that uniform, you become a target to the criminal element, right? However, there is a sentiment that goes into policing, and those sentiments are based on historical events, right? So the historical events of the sentiment of policing in this country has always been one of the African is the criminal. And policing, as research shows, is a direct descendant and derivative of slave patrols and slave catching in this country, meaning that there was no police force before there was the African presence in an enslaved condition in this country, meaning that they were established to keep, quote, law and order in particularly southern communities where the majority of the population were African enslaved people and the minority of the population were southern whites, right? The reason that the population was kept that way is because the working class is always going to outnumber the, how would you say, the aristocratic class, right? So you need a show of force if you're going to keep society running at status quo. And in this country, the status quo has been white aristocratic people on top and poor people on the bottom, and of the bottom, poor black people beneath the bottom. Okay. And then you have a mixed middle class of mostly white Europeans with sprinkles of other racial exceptionalism, right? And this is the way we need to start looking at the issue of systemic racism and the issue of policing in this country. I want to say this. The root of the issue still remains. And the reason that I showed you all recent news stories that are of today, of your lifetime, when you were born, is because today there are still racial killings that are taking place that are hidden behind the color of law. There are racial shootings that take place within the police department that are hidden behind the color of law. There are racial executions. You know, one of the first panels that I went to for Mike Brown was at FIU, and I called it what it was. It was police murder. Right? We tend to use these euphemisms like police brutality, police overreach. When Mike Brown was singled out, he was picked, he was eventually murdered, and we call it everything other than that because we, as the majority of the population who are trying to benefit or benefiting from the system, don't want to believe that the system is so deeply and utterly corrupted, because it causes a rift in our reality. So I wanted to show you guys the reality of what's happening in North Miami Beach. And these things are happening. It's not just going to be in North Miami Beach. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know, you don't just happen upon something like this and think that it's so localized, especially since we know that police murders are happening all over the country. You know, almost every other week. Before that, it was even more frequent. There's video evidence of police murders occurring, and we do, as a country, what we always do. We blame the victim. We find dirt on the victim. We shower the press with the victim's potential criminal record. And we invalidate the life of the victim in that case, and thereby championing the police. This is the kind of thinking and behavior that leads to these types of news stories that very quickly, they're very quickly brought into national attention, if at all, and then very quickly they go away. But what I tend to do is I go back, I find them, I record them, and I keep them in my archives so that I don't forget, so that I don't become deterred from what the real underlying problem is. Right? What comments do you have on the things that I just said, or what you saw today, Kiefer?
Well, actually, for the video, when you were talking about it, is the kid who had the car, the truck was perceived as a gun, but his caretaker got shot. So, and the woman, when she reported it, she never said that there was like another man who's aggressing or like trying to make him commit suicide or anything like that. For any reason, he could be like de-escalating the suicide if the cop like heard the situation. So
So the person who had the perceived weapon was not the person that was shot. So you were able to see visually with your own eyes the different phenotypes of the people involved in the situation. And unfortunately, the phenotype that we classify as African was shot. And the news story says, 3 shots were fired. Something that you learn when you are trying to become proficient with shooting or range training or firearms is that you never shoot at something that you are not willing to destroy or kill. Every bullet that leaves the barrel of a gun is potentially lethal. And police are not trained to fire 1, 2, or 3, but multiple, persistent, and sustained rounds of ammunition. This is why often when one police officer opens fire in this country, everyone who is on that scene will often join in that volley of shots. This is why suspects in this country are shot multiple times, because it's a training issue. And there's nothing wrong with that when you're in a military war zone, right? Because we're assuming if you're in a military war zone, not that military war zones that people are right to be there. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're in a military war zone and you're going up against an enemy force who has guns that are going to shoot at you as well, then yes, you what we know from military practice is that the side that fires the most rounds downrange is usually one that wins the conflict. So America has been sustained in that history of winning military conflicts, right? However, when you bring that training into the civilian sector that we call policing, and you bring that same militaristic training, then you are dealing with a police that feel that they are operating from the mental conditions of policing an occupied area or an occupied space, right? Police training was not always like this. This is more a contingent of the war on drugs, when surplus military weapons, surplus military vehicles, and military training were awarded to police departments that could continually bring drugs off the street and report that to the Federal Bureau. So at that time, everything became a drug offense, right? In order to secure federal funding for each department. So you would get vehicles, some cities even have little miniature tanks, battering rams, body armor, military style weapons. That's the M4s and the AR-15s and the sniper rifles and all that. In fact, that was the invention of the SWAT team, right? To fight the war on drugs. And we know from the North Miami Beach story that it was particularly the SWAT team that was training their snipers on those faces. I can keep rambling, but what do you think in summation, Chad, about our discussion today from everything that you gleaned?
I think it was really interesting. I was actually about to ask about, because my mom constantly says, "Oh, police used to catch slaves. They used to catch runaway slaves." And I was just about to ask you when you brought that up. So like that's like something interesting that now I know is true. That we were kind of it was kind of like built upon, but yeah, I felt everything you said. I like really think that there's been like some real knowledge, because like, you know, why are police getting military training to handle like local civilian situations? Like it doesn't make sense. Like, how could we? And that's where I think it might come to us, or like people, to be like, yo, can we stop this? Can we do something to like change? Can we get community policing, more community policing? Um, and like actually like have the police like drive around, and so we're not scared that they're coming around the corner. They can drive around and be like, "Hey guys, how's it going? I'm your local police officer. I'm doing this, this, and this, and blah blah blah," and build like those relationships with police officers, instead of seeing their car or seeing a police officer and like we all get well, at least African Americans, some African Americans, we all just like, okay, like don't look funny, don't do anything crazy. So like, yeah, that's
So to comment on what you said, Chad, the reason that community policing is non-expeditious is because there is no money for departments in community policing, meaning that departments have to prove their effectiveness, right? And the way departments prove their effectiveness is with arrests based on evidence that lead to convictions or plea deals. So the police are put in a situation where they have to arrest people to show that there are criminal elements on the street, thereby putting them in this circular logic that if we want to get paid, we have to arrest people. So everything, no matter how minor, becomes an arrestable offense. And something that I wanted to say before I let Roselaw speak, and sorry, Haley, your connection is bad, but thank you for joining us, even though you didn't get to participate. You were going to say something, Chad?
Yeah, I forgot to say, Haley was saying some stuff in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see here. We're going to try to expand the catalog.
While we're waiting, Racial Equity Institute does full days of training every month. We did not make the cut for February, but this is a full 2 days. And again, your calendars are very tight, but we have an option on March 11th and 12th for 5 students to take training alongside Urban League adults and Broward college students. So it's like 9 to 4, it's virtual. If you guys are interested, it's absolutely worthwhile training. Shaba will back me up on this, but it's very intensive, but it does take full 2 days. We'd have to get parental permission, anything like that. Have any of you been through that already? Not yet? Okay. Yes. Have you been, Roselaw, you've been through the full 2 days?
Yes, I attended for February.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Oh, great. You got it in February. That's awesome. And would you recommend it?
Yes, it's very informational, and they go through like a lot of details and information about racial equity and everything about it. It's
Yep.
very good.
Soup to nuts, start to finish, right? So if you guys look at your calendars, right, March 11th and 12th, and get back to me, we do have to send names in so we can hold the slots, all right? And I'll put the word out more broadly, but I wanted to throw it out here now. Thank you.
Very, very important, structured, formal training, and the Racial Equity Institute does an excellent job in that class of covering the issues in North America, particularly. Right? As I pointed out while I was there, there is a global systemic issue with race and social justice, but the problem is so big that you can only take it in bite-sized pieces, right? We were only able to cover 2 news stories today. And the same thing that the Racial Equity Institute looks at is how can we get a comprehensive yet concise American look at the issue of racial equity and social injustice in America since the forming of the country. So please, Roselaw, you already know how invaluable that information was. So you all definitely sign up for that and participate. But back to you, Roselaw. You were going to give your closing thoughts and comments.
Everything that was like learned today was very interesting, and just to see like how in the police department and military it's like they're trained to do these things, and it's not what you were saying about the system is based on like, let's say it's not based on like legality and versus the morality. Um that's very true, because even though things may be considered legal, but it's not very moral in a way that that it should be handled. And when it came to systemic racism, when you mentioned it, it really stuck out to me, because with the systems, it's not really in a way that everything is equal with blacks and whites. It's in a way like blacks are always being targeted in a way, like for the police, for the 2 stories. African Americans were being targeted most. So it's just interesting and disappointing to see like how America handled these type of situations.
And mostly what we get are weak excuses that hide behind flimsy legal arguments. There was a plethora of legal arguments against why enslaved Africans in the South shouldn't run away. There were even diagnoses of mental health conditions that European scientists and doctors came up with, psychologists. One of the diagnoses was drapetomania, that an enslaved African was stricken with the sickness that caused him to continually try to run away from being in an enslaved condition, a medical diagnosis. And, one of the ways of curing drapetomania, of course, was intense beatings and removing of body parts and so on and so forth. So when an entire institution recruits their scientists, their law enforcers, and their greatest public minds to get into conversations about how to keep an entire race of people in a particular desired position that so happens to work out to their financial benefit. There is no really amount of legal work or speeches or meetings that can affect change in something. The only way to affect change is that the entire youth population decides that that is not the system that they want to live under anymore. The system, even with Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement, the students involved in that movement were rarely spoken about. And I'm speaking about grade school students, right? Children that were being taught that civil rights was the only important issue to be discussing in America. And that's why you go from the civil rights movement into the Black Panther era, right? These things are closely connected because of how you intend to inform the youth, right? This is why these kinds of interactions are important, because I have to inform you what I learned, and you all have to really begin to spread this information and this way of thinking with the entire youth population if you want to affect change. Because adults are not going to be able to legislate this stuff out of existence. It's not going to happen. Otherwise, it would have happened already. All right. So coming up on 4, I know that Colleen has a hard stop, and I want to go ahead and respect that. So I will say thank you all for joining us today. Think about what I've said, share, and be affected by it. Be different. Be the social activist that you need to be if you want to see an end to this situation.
And join
All right.
Haley's weekly call next Thursday. She's doing the YWCA 21-day challenge. So Chad was on that, Kiefer was on that. Roselaw, you were there, right? Okay, I just, when you don't have your camera on, I don't necessarily, I mean, I don't connect the dots as easily. It's so good to see your face. Thank you so much, Shaba. This has been wonderful, and we look forward. And I think we want to encourage more students to come to this. This is just too valuable information not to be shared a little bit more broadly, maybe not hundreds of students, but at least, 10, right? So you all are amazing, rock stars. We'll see you soon, and we'll see all of you hopefully with Haley again next Thursday.
Agreed.
All right.
Kwaheri.
Kwaheri. Awesome. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
You all too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thank you.